Applications Committee meeting on Wednesday 11th of June. We are quorate. Can we have Sederunt and apologies, please, Gillian?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to confirm we are quorate and we have apologies today from Councillor Ian Dick, Councillor Peter Diggle and Councillor Jack Groom.
Thanks, Gillian. Can I remind everyone present that this meeting will be recorded and that recording will be subsequently made available for public listening. Do we have any declarations of interest? Okay, thank you. The minute of meeting of 28th May 2014, is that a true record? Great, thank you. In that case now, Gillian, can you take us through the process for today, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered to speak at this meeting within the period specified in Council policy. No other persons will be allowed to speak. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak to make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person. The Chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. We now move to the agenda items. First item on the agenda is item 4. Erection of swimming pool, building and siting of associated plant and machinery for a temporary period of 20 months at Dumfries Ice Bowl, King Street, Dumfries. The application type is full planning permission. The case officer is Andrew Robinson and the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. Andrew, will you take us through your presentation, please? Remember, this is a new application, so we'll go through the full process again. Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, it's an application seeking temporary planning permission for the erection of a swimming pool, associated plant and machinery in the car park of Dumfries Ice Bowl. So this is the application site, which is situated close to Palmerston Park, for those who don't know. This location plan shows the location of the site, highlighting surrounding features such as the local road network, Palmerston Park and the new Dumfries Football Academy. And this site plan shows features closest to it, in particular the nearest residential dwelling, which is Meadowbank Cottage. This is how the site is currently laid out, which is showing the parking and access arrangements to the site. And this is the proposed site layout, which would result in the loss of 46 car parking spaces for the facility to be sited. A cycle stand will also be provided for 6 bicycles, which is just shown in the sort of top part of the site layout. These are the elevations of the proposed building and the plant containers. That's not to scale, it's just the way that the slide has been done. So that's the elevations. And surrounding the plant and fuel containers is a 1.8 metre high green mesh fence, which is for security purposes. The final details of this was actually submitted after the committee report was prepared, so it's some details that haven't been taken into account in the committee report, but it is actually an amendment to a fence that was submitted at the start of the application, which officers expressed concern about the visual appearance of. Main aspects of the proposal includes a number of overspill parking arrangements in order to mitigate against the loss of car parking spaces on the site, as well as spaces to accommodate the development. So the main proposal is to use the car parking area at the Queen of the South Football Arena, which is access to the site via an access track, which is highlighted on the slides. There's also another number of alternative locations provided as well, which also shows public car parking, and I'll go through some of these locations in the slides, but there's 4 car parks identified within 300 metres of the site that could also be used. These are some slides of the site and the surrounding locality. So this is the site where the swimming pool would be located. This is looking at it from another angle within the car park. This is the remaining car parking area, which would be for the ice bowl as well as the swimming pool. This is the access to the site with some industrial units located opposite. This is the nearest neighbouring property opposite the site. And this is a photograph taken from King Street looking at the site as a whole. In terms of the overspill car parking, there was a drawing which shows, one drawing that's been submitted shows all of the car parks, but these are some pictures of them all. This is the main one at the football arena, which is just located from Lochfield Road. This is the proposed access track which would serve this particular car park, which is proposed in the traffic management plan to be upgraded, which is welcome. This is the nearest car park to the site, which is on King Street. This has provision for 18 car parking spaces. This is sorry, that's the one for 18 car parking spaces. This is another car park on King Street, which has got provision for 30 car parking spaces, which is adjacent to a residential properties, well, a block of flats. This is the public car park on David Street for 19 vehicles. The other car park on this site is actually privately owned. So that doesn't include the 19 spaces. And this is the car park on College Street, which has 46 car parking spaces, but it is actually recognised that in order to access the site from this car park, pedestrians would have to cross Glasgow Road. So taking all of the relevant planning considerations into account, considered by officers that measures outlined in the traffic management plan would help to mitigate against the loss of the car parking space and ensure that the development, suitable parking for the development is there for the duration of the development. And as well, the recommended conditions for noise would also consider to help that issue could be managed if there's any noise from the plant containers in particular. So the application is recommended for approval for a temporary period of 20 months. Thanks, Chair.
Andrew, thank you for that. Do any members, Councillor Hislop?
Could you tell me, with regard to the car parking spaces at the ones within the table of this additional paper we received, how many of those have limited time parking, or is it all day parking in all of them? Therefore, it could be residents that are parked there all day.
As I understand, they're council-owned car parks. I don't think there's any restrictions on the car parks in those areas. I could ask my roads colleague to confirm what the restrictions are for parking.
Those car parks are out with the Dumfries 2-hour and restricted parking areas, so there's no restrictions on them.
Councillor Blake?
Thank you, Chairman. If we could go back to the slide, it's a kind of underexposed slide of the access road to the overspill car park.
Can we shut the curtains, girls? Would that be possible to help with the... Turn the lights down, that'd be great.
In that particular access road, how long is that, and is this lit?
In terms of length, approximately it's probably 100 metres or so. It isn't lit at the minute, but that's part of a measure which the applicant is proposing as part of upgrades. The upgrades to that access track are part of a measure in the traffic management plan.
Any other questions? Councillor McComb, then Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. Andrew, you mentioned the loss of 46 parking spaces at the Ice Bowl. How many parking spaces will this leave in the Ice Bowl car park?
I could actually count the plan. If I've got a to scale plan, I can count that. If you give me a minute, I can count that if you're discussing.
David might be able to help with that question.
From memory, I looked at that for the previous meeting, and it's around about 80 odd spaces, I seem to remember. It's around about a third of the spaces would be lost for the swimming pool, but I can't remember the exact number. I apologise for that.
Just to clarify, David, did you say 80 lost or 80 remaining?
There should be 80 remaining. It was about 120 odd spaces, I seem to remember, in the overall unit.
Can we just refrain from calling out to each other, please? And I know you're trying to be helpful, Councillor McCauley, but They're a managed arrangement in this committee. Councillor McComb, are you satisfied with that? Okay, Councillor Thompson. And Tracy, would you try and put the lights back on, please?
Thank you, Chair. There's actually two questions. I'll start with one anyway. Just on the access track, obviously there's within the application it's got that the pathway would be made good and lighting would be provided. So just in terms of the burden of maintenance for that on an ongoing basis, is there an arrangement agreed for that?
Andrew?
It's maybe something to ask the applicant when they have their opportunity to speak. We've stated actually that from a planning perspective, the works required are actually to do the works to that track would be permitted development. They wouldn't actually need planning permission because it is a private access track. But the works in terms of making good the pavement and the lighting is satisfactory from a planning perspective, and there's a requirement as part of the conditions to ensure that that's done prior to the development being commenced. But the actual logistics and the arrangements probably best to ask the applicant.
But sorry, I haven't introduced Ken Druitt, who's representing the Roads Department, and we have the applicant, we have Richard Greaves, Scott Grant and Clive Carruthers, and I propose to bring them forward when we discuss the traffic management plan. But if you'd prefer to have them here now, I'm quite relaxed about that, but I thought we'd do, a part at a time would deal with the application and then the traffic management plan. But carry on, Stephen.
Well, the second part of my question related to the traffic management plan, so if that's coming up anyway, I'll just wait until then. Okay.
Are there any other questions for the planning officer? In that case, we don't have registered speakers, but I'll ask Richard Greaveson's team. We have a registered speaker? It's the applicant, aye. So Richard Greaveson and his other staff colleagues are there. Ken Druitt's here. So any members that have any questions in relation to the traffic management plan, now is their opportunity to address that. So your first or your next question, Stephen, was in relation to the traffic management plan.
Yeah, it was actually touching on what had been answered earlier with to do with unrestricted parking in the area and the sort of alternative sites for parking. And I was just really just to seek clarity on how any management could actually be enforced if cars are parked legally and how those arrangements would work.
I think that is laid out in the traffic plan. But Ken, can you first of all deal with that, and then Richard, I know, has assigned its staff to support that management measure. But Ken, you first, please.
Parking on the public road where there are restrictions, clearly that affects where you can park. If there are no restrictions, then providing a vehicle is taxed, insured and legally on the public road, then they can park pretty well anywhere.
Chairman, over here. I want to just ask a question on process, because I wouldn't like to think we've got a failing process here. Have we not got a clear process outlined, and we normally get a presentation from the applicant, which we haven't received yet? I feel a wee bit uncomfortable asking questions of the applicant before they at least had a chance to say a few words.
Well, I'm happy to have the applicant speak to the traffic management plan. We have a traffic management plan. It was available on the internet. David has provided every member with a hard copy, so each member should have had the opportunity to study that in advance. So I presumed you'd have done that, and that you would simply address any elements of the traffic management plan that you were interested or concerned about. But by all means, Ken, can you or Andrew just briefly deal with it? Well, you want to do something, David? Well, according to David, he's absolutely right. We should allow the applicant 3 minutes to present their case. So leisure and sport in this case are the applicants. So Richard, I will time you. You have 3 minutes to present your case to the committee, and then we'll ask questions of you thereafter. At your leisure, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. The application for temporary planning approval is before you today, following the Policy and Resources Committee on the 3rd of September, when members agreed to develop enhanced alternative provision whilst DG1 swimming facilities were unavailable due to the capital remedial works. At that same committee, members selected Dumfries Ice Bowl as the preferred site for the provision of a temporary pool. predominantly due to the suitability of the site in terms of the capital build, but also because it presented some operational efficiencies and opportunities in terms of the leisure and sport facilities at the Ice Bowl that would work alongside the new pool. In terms of the legal proceedings and the legal process against the main contractor in regard to DG1, it's very important that the council helps to mitigate its costs during the closure, and the provision of the temporary pool was deemed by our legal experts to underpin this. They're very happy to support the proposal as it stands in terms of the provision of a temporary swimming provision for the duration of the closure of DG1. Chair, the only other thing to say, I think from myself, is that subject to discussion today, there's obviously been thus far detailed discussion with partners and the council's legal advisors and QC in regard to the process. We've had a lot of discussion with colleagues in roads who've been very helpful, and the planning team regarding traffic management, taking on board the concerns that were previously raised by residents at the Ice Bowl. We've come up with what we think is a very detailed traffic management plan, which we'd be happy to answer questions on, specifically in terms of how we will look to manage that and support the management of traffic on the site. But happy to take questions through yourself, Chair.
Thanks for that, Richard. Do any member have any questions for either the applicant or roads manager? Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks very much, Chair. It's a quick one in regards to, it's on the back of what Councillor Hislop brought up. Part of it was answered about restrictions on parking. I just wondered, does that apply to Queen of the South? Is there any restrictions in regards to there? So just to get that satisfied, and what the provision is like compared to what the previous application we had in front of us, the provision of parking, is compared to that, and compared to the actual need. I think we need approximately, about 80 or 90, whatever it is, spaces for what's being applied for here. So how much spaces do we have compared to that as well, please?
Thanks for that, Councillor Carruthers. Can you address that, Richard or Scott?
Thanks, Chair. We would require 80 spaces as the worst case scenario. The bather load of the temporary swimming pool is 80. So at worst case, we'd be looking for 80 spaces. And in terms of the overall traffic management plan, we've identified 587 available public car parking spaces within a close proximity of the temporary swimming pool. And in terms of Queen of the South, there are no restrictions on the Queen of the South parking.
Thank you for that. Okay. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. It was actually the question I'd raised earlier with the case officer, just to do with the maintenance of the path that would be made good, and what arrangements, if there's any more detail on that.
Thanks for that. I think according to the report it was to be a temporary path as well, but there was the opportunity to make that a permanent feature. I think that's right. But either Andrew, Ken or Richard might want to address that. Richard, in the first instance.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Certainly for the duration of the temporary provision, then our own revenue budget in terms of the provision of the pool would be used in terms of maintenance and upkeep. Thereafter, the partnership with Queen of the South would result in Queen's taking responsibility for that area, and that's been agreed with the Chairman.
Thanks for that, Richard. So you're saying, in essence, it will be a permanent feature and Queen of the South will adopt the installation?
If approved by this committee, that's correct, Chair, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. I read the representations made by people on the website, and one of the ones which actually struck me was, and I quote, "The Queen of the South football park has always been open for parking, but it has never been used by the public for the Ice Bowl, cars and buses for previous Ice Bowl events. So now, why does the council think people will suddenly start to park there if a swimming pool is sited within the Ice Bowl?" Now, I have a certain amount of sympathy because, in fact, the entrance to the overflow car park, Chairman, is not obvious. Can I ask the applicant why and how they really think that they will be able to direct traffic away, so to speak, from the facility? It's counterintuitive. People tend not to think that they have to drive away from the facility in order to get back to it. I'm a little concerned about that.
I appreciate your question. I presume it will be because staff will be directing people there and encourage them to go there. And given that we have 587 spaces available, we only require a maximum of 80, potentially, there's a huge addition that we may never need to take advantage of. But I'm sure either Scott or Richard will address that. Scott?
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely, we would assign staff to redirect traffic at the entrance to the main car park, but we'd also support that with a significant number of sort of educational, promotional type materials that would also identify all the other car parking opportunities that are around the location. I guess in terms of incentives as well, it's important to note that we have identified within the traffic plan a number of alternative means of getting to the complex, and we also have an incentive scheme which would allow future customers, to get a discount if they can evidence the fact that they've taken the bus or used an alternative mode of transport.
Thanks, Scott. I noticed in the report we're offering a 10% discount if someone produces a bus ticket, and obviously not everyone going there will travel by motor vehicle, and some may share. So we're talking about maximum capacity rather than actual, I would presume. But anyway, do any other members have any questions? Councillor McComb?
Thanks, Chair. I notice restricted opening times in relation to Queen of the South matches and Solway Shark matches, an hour before these matches commence. Is there also a buffer after the matches end?
Scott?
Generally speaking, based on the current opening times, the Solway Shark matches wouldn't actually impact on the opening of the pool. In terms of the Queen of the South matches, I guess we've allowed for the hour beforehand, but that can be reviewed. And again, it would more than likely would be that we wouldn't reopen after the match, given the complexities of sending staff away and bringing them back again. But again, in terms of peak points and pressure points, and that will be reviewed on a weekly basis. And certainly we will be amending any issues that may arise.
Thanks. And I presume what you're saying is actually, although it's a traffic plan, it's a work in progress, and if anything's identified, it will be immediately addressed, which is an important thing to ensure that there's no long-term impact. Councillor Hislop?
Chair, I note that we're scaring away our current customers from there. We're asking all the clubs to move to the Palmerston car park. Why have the swimmers got first dibs on the car park when usually swimmers are fitter people? Curling might not be as fit. Surely the curling people and the skaters might be better to be actually in the car park next to it. We've got a world championship. My understanding is in the past we've actually put porta cabins on some of the car parking in the car park. That'll have to possibly happen again to allow the teams from the Women's Senior Championship to actually change. We've also got a thing here that says at all times we would be allowed to use the Tesco car park. Why are we shutting it an hour early then? Surely if we can use the Tesco car park when Queens are at home at all times, although the letter doesn't say that, and it does state that we're only allowed to send temporary swimming pool customers there, not ice skating or curlers, according to the letter, unless I'm reading it wrong. That's what it says in the letter. Where are we going to put all these cars? We've also been told there's 586 empty spaces. There isn't 586 empty spaces. Everyone was full when we looked at those pictures. So they're not available.
I presume that photograph would taken to illustrate the capacity that's possible, because we'll close the pool on match days. So although we have use of it at all times, clearly if we're not using the pool, there'll be nobody turning up to go into the pool. But it's really an issue for Richard to address. If there's a supplementary, present that as well, and I'll get Richard to deal.
We're not closing the Ice Bowl, so we've got the Ice Bowl customers during the matches. We're only closing the temporary swimming pool. If you've got 200 cars or 150 cars coming to an Ice Bowl competition, where are they going to park? Because you've put 46 cars on there.
I'm sure Richard or Scott will deal with that. And remember, that'll be one occasion in 20 months you're talking about. We're talking about an overall management plan that will deal with the potential as well as the consistent or regular situations that will occur. Richard?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll try and take each point as it was raised by Councillor Hislop. Certainly in terms of the groups that use both facilities, It's obviously quite reasonable and easy for us in terms of the dialogue and the conversation, the partnerships we have with those groups to help ask their support in terms of management of the car parking spaces. We'll be liaising with all groups, be they the swimming club that come to use the temporary facility or indeed the curlers and hockey players and skaters, etc., to try and manage any peak in demand accordingly. Certainly the initial indication we've had from those customers is that they're happy to support us in that process. Likewise, as Councillor Hislop correctly says, at peak times the current Ice Bowl car park is in high demand, but only at peak times, and we know that during the day it's often quite sat empty. When we've got the likes of the World Championships on, whilst there will be the likelihood that we would require some kind of porter cabin provision, that will not impact or impinge on any of the car parking spaces. In terms of as I say, the management at peak times, I think that's very much about us working with those community groups, working with our established partners to make sure that that we're utilising all the spaces at our disposal.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. It is also a planning principle here with respect to the structure plan that we are to make best use of services and facilities. And I would be grateful for an explanation as to whether or not this is the best use of facilities when clearly what's being stated to us here that we cannot use them without closing one to accommodate another activity. So I think I need a little bit of help with respect to the planning policy angle of this, please.
Again, I'll ask Richard to address that, but obviously, for the sake of comfort use, toilet facilities, restaurant facilities, to promote the Ice Bowl, it would be sensible, I would suggest, to have a facility adjacent to it to encourage people to use both if that was an opportunity presented to them. Richard also alluded to the fact that it would help staff to be co-located or located in a single location or locus. But Richard, do you want to deal with the points that Councillor Maitland raises?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. So in terms of the facility and the operation, in terms of leisure and sport provision, as you correctly stated, when we identified the Ice Bowl site as our option, we discussed the opportunities for staff currently based at DG1, both in terms of catering, DG First staff transferring to the Ice Bowl and indeed leisure and sport staff. There are opportunities there for staff development and some synergies there in terms of the provision and the services that they provide. We also believe that it was a great opportunity for customers who perhaps have never been to the Ice Bowl, who would be swimmers and vice versa, for us to be able to market and cross-sell those leisure activities, so that we can perhaps leave a lasting legacy from what was there, whereby customers who were previously just swimmers could perhaps become Ice Bowl users as well. And as I say, that's really important in terms of the discussion with the legal team to help mitigate the costs that are incurred by the council during the closure of DG1. So from a very practical operational leisure and sport perspective, they were the drivers behind some of the benefits of that site being selected by members on the 3rd of September.
Thanks, Richard. And we talk about costs incurred by the council. Are there implications for staffing as well?
The staffing of the facility will be and is included in terms of the DG1 revenue budget that will be available to us, obviously offset by the income that we generate through the temporary pool to a degree. However, all of those revenue budgets are included within the workings of the council's legal team and the forensic accountants and form part of the legal case against the main contractor.
Thank you. Councillor McCaughey.
Basically, that's the point I was going to make, because it was maybe straight off the planning side a wee bit, but I would remind people that half of this committee were at the policy committee and should remember the reasons why unanimously the policy committee decided to promote the case for the Ice Bowl. And that, as Richard says, mitigation of costs, which you have to prove. Another one is, of course, the retention of employees, any other site, and we're looking at perhaps employees having to be made redundant. So it was a mitigation of costs and the retention of employees. That's the thing that drove the policy committee to make this recommendation to this committee.
I take it this is a planning application in its own right and has nothing to do with any policy decision or policy committee decision. And I think everybody's aware of that, but I'm grateful to your input, Councillor McCaughey. Councillor Maitland, then Councillor Hislop.
Well, I think actually my question was specifically avoiding straying into other decisions which are made by other places in this council. We're looking particularly at planning issues, which are make the best use of services and facilities. And it strikes me as odd that we're being asked to place a facility close to a position which means that it cannot open. Because there isn't capacity. That's what we're being told here. There is not capacity. When the Queen of the South are playing at home or there are other events at the Ice Bowl, this facility has to close because there is not capacity. So I would suggest to you that I'm not getting a full answer. I've had an answer with respect to other council facilities, but I'm not getting an answer in terms of planning here, Chairman, and I'm looking for the planning answer to that.
Well, the Queen of the South play for 3 hours every second week, and that's probably a modest compromise for a facility in a location that best suits the professional judgment of officers. And it's temporary, it's for 20 months only, at most, because it says up to 20 months in this document. Richard, would you like to respond to Councillor Maitland's question?
Just to reiterate your own comments, Chair, in terms of the frequency that we will require to put in place additional control measures to deal with those peak demands in terms of the site itself and the management of traffic. We believe that the benefits in terms of what the provision of swimming on that site will bring on a temporary basis, are worthy of the application as it's presented to members, albeit with some control measures in place to try and manage those peak demands, which, as you say, will be reasonably infrequent.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Hislop? Okay. Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, it's just again about the management of well, it's actually about the management of authorised parking, and I think that's where part of the issue is, because obviously you can manage unauthorised parking if it's an obstruction or what have you, and community safety can patrol that, but it's the burden on unrestricted parking that I think is the issue it's causing in terms of some of the objections that were received against this. So it's really just how that unrestricted authorised parking can be managed, because it's not. There's a good description of all the measures that can be taken in place, but in terms of enforcing anything, it's not really clear, and I was just wondering if I could get a bit more detail on that.
Well, my take on it would be, if we identify that there is a real issue, we own some of the parking spaces, we could place a condition. But anyway, Gillian apparently wants to.
I think if we just direct that question to the appropriate officer.
Richard?
Well, I mean, Chair, in terms of enforcement from our side, in terms of leisure and sport, we'll obviously be proactive in terms of ensuring people park where we have asked them to park. In terms of the enforcement of parking on the road itself, then I'd need to direct the question, if I may, through you to my roads colleagues. But certainly we will be taking a proactive approach to try and do whatever we can to make sure that customers park where we have identified spaces accordingly.
Thanks, Richard. I think the last part of this document, the traffic management plan, says that it will take other measures as appropriate and as necessary when circumstances prevail. Ken, do you want to add anything? I suppose when you're asked the question, can we, if necessary, impose restrictions on parking on our land, albeit on a temporary basis, if we see that as an appropriate measure?
I'm not entirely sure whether we can impose restrictions on our own car parks without an order. I don't think we can. I think there would need to be, I'll take legal advice on that, but I suspect an order is required in order to do that. Any order that has to be promoted clearly is also open to objection by the public when it goes through the process.
Okay. We now have Councillor Witts and Councillor Crothers. Then Councillor McKee.
Chairman, you have acknowledged me twice and haven't brought me in.
It's Councillor Blake first, then Councillor Witts, Councillor McKee. Councillor Crothers and Councillor McKee.
Thank you, Chairman. Scott, it's just to clarify something you said. Car parking at the Ice Bowl, you said you will employ a member of staff to redirect traffic. Is that the entire hours that the swimming pool will be open?
Effectively, sorry, thanks, Chair. Effectively, what we'll do is we'll have somebody on a shift pattern within the operation of the complex itself, and at peak times, yes, we will have somebody out there that will redirect traffic. At other times where that's not necessarily, then clearly there'll be other duties that they can perform.
So it's peak times, but it will be monitored at all other times.
Thanks, Ian. Councillor Witts.
Thank you, Chair. I would refer to the letter from Mr Hewitson, Queen of the South Chairman, in the second sentence. What are the implications, and perhaps financially, for us if we comply with his suggestion in the second sentence of his letter?
Scott.
Chairman, is that a planning consideration?
It's part of the Planet Traffic Management Plan, or at least the evidence of the Traffic Management Plan, but I'm happy to discount it if you believe that it's not part of the consideration. Richard.
Chair, thank you. My understanding is that the area that they're talking about behind the stand at the north end forms part of the plan as we discussed earlier, and that will form part of the capital works that will be undertaken in order to mitigate these parking arrangements.
Thanks for that. Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Chairman. I hope you take this constructively, but for a personal point of view, what we're picking up, when a member asks a question, and when you answer it, then we get the same answer from the officer. It might look as if you're steering the officer. And I think you're doing a great job as Chair and Chairman, but I hope you take that constructively.
Thank you for that, Councillor Carruthers. Councillor McKay.
It isn't a you're a bad driver, Chair. On page 13 of 34, the residents have raised a number of issues, and they're talking about traffic management systems run at the present moment, and the thought of increased traffic within the streets is negligent of the council to even consider. Now, for the residents' point of view, and I appreciate you'll say that the new Palmerston was there when they moved in, and the Ice Bowl probably for most of them was there when the people moved in as well. But I think we'd all agree that the Ice Bowl is performing far above anybody's expectations 15, 20, 25 years ago when the Ice Bowl opened, and with the result that these people are suffering quite a bit for increased traffic on specific times, and there's just no argument to that. What I'd like traffic management to consider, if I start on number 11, your promotion of park and ride schemes, you haven't highlighted that there's cycle access to the Ice Bowl. If you come off the Mark Sutton cycle path through the Tesco site, you could cycle almost straight to the Ice Bowl in comparatively clearer traffic. With regards to parking restrictions, I would ask you to consider issuing the residents with residents parking discs so that they can park in front of their houses. It's all right, councillor shaking her head there, it might fall off, be careful. They should be allowed to park. I don't know that they all have parking spaces beside their homes, so it may be that we should allow them residence parking. We're only talking about 8 or 10 houses. I would also ask that under yellow signage, number 19, could we direct traffic leaving the Ice Bowl car park? Could we direct it to turn right, go down King Street, David Street, onto the Glasgow Road, and thereafter they can go to the roundabout and go any direction they want, rather than having them going through the residential areas? I think that would help to address some of the issues as well. I think that covers my main points just now, Chair. Thanks very much.
At the risk of incurring my colleague's wrath, I would presume if ever we get to the stage of making a proposal, the cycleway could be included in the traffic management plan. Residence parking is only applicable where there are restrictions. If there are no restrictions, make any difference unless you protect resident spaces, and I don't know whether we can do that, a condition or no. And the traffic plan, again, is something that could be dealt with through the traffic management plan. But if we ever get to the stage of making recommendations, I'm sure we can incorporate the points you're raising, Councillor McKee. Are there any other questions for the applicant? Councillor Gilroy.
I would just like to know what the leisure and sport officers can do to enforce the parking restrictions that are being imposed or being suggested with this new traffic management plan, because they are the ones that are going to have to deal with the parking problems. I want to know what enforcement they can use.
I think that answer has already been given. They will encourage
You're doing
people
it again,
to go elsewhere.
Chair.
But again, I will ask the officer. However, I am entitled to offer an opinion to you, Councillor Gilroy, and that's what I'm doing. Okay, Mr. Greaveson, can you respond to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yep, let's start with going back to that point of encouraging customers to go where we've asked them to. In terms of enforcement, Chair, what I would say is that whilst we have no authority to obviously look at enforcement measures in terms of the off-site parking, what we can work with is when we know that there are customers of our facilities that are continually ignoring our requests to park where we have asked them to, then we can certainly take or consider enforcement action in terms of them accessing the facility if they continually ignore what we're saying. But hopefully, and as other sites, we've continually taken on board this. We've continually worked with customers, and eventually the message has got through. But in terms of traffic management, no, of course, our enforcement powers, if you like, are not there, Chair, as you be aware.
Thanks, Richard. And please remember, it's a plan that can be evolving and can be amended or adapted to fit the case. Councillor Thompson, just about giving this a fair hearing. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair, again. It's just on General Policy 77, it's page 15, Section C. I mean, regardless of, I know we're looking at the traffic management plan here, etc., but I'm still having difficulty squaring that this is explicitly a material loss of residential amenity, arising from noise, light, parking and traffic issues. And although there may be measures in place, there's not an identification of new spaces as such. So how is that being squared by what's been suggested as mitigation?
Andrew or Ken? And you can repeat the question again if you want, Stephen. And did you get it, Andrew?
Chair, in terms of the number of spaces, there's a loss at the Ice Bowl, but there's more than that loss being provided as compensation at the Queen of the South Arena. So there's actually going to be an increase in parking that's available. Some of it is a little bit further away, but it's still within 400 metres or 5 minutes walking time, which is generally regarded as required for a walkable neighbourhood.
Thanks for that. Councillor Geddes.
Thanks very much, Chair. Paragraphs 4.25 and 4.26 of the report, they talk about impact on archaeological features and servicing issues respectively, and it's indicated that in both instances it would be recommended that a directive is placed on any permission granted. We're quite sure from a planning perspective that that's a more appropriate way to do this, sir, rather than the implementation of a condition.
Andrew?
The request for the directive was actually the archaeologist's request. It hasn't, the wording of the directive hasn't actually come forward into the committee report, but it can be added. That's comments that was given on the previous application. It was requested by the archaeologist to be a directive based on the fact that it's not considered by the archaeologist that there will be any archaeological remains found, but it's very much part of a measure just in case anything arises through building works.
Councillor Geddes.
Thanks, sir. And on 4.26 of servicing, it's also recommended that it's by a directive. Does the same rationale apply to that, Chair?
Andrew?
Yes, that's correct. That is the responsibility of the applicant to take up with Scottish Water in terms of connecting to their network. They have to go through a process with Scottish Water. It's to advise the applicant of that process that they need to do.
Thanks, Chair. Grateful for the response. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, we are now in session. Councillor Geddes and Councillor Dryburgh.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, sir, I'll plead the virtue of consistency if anyone challenges me. I supported the previous application, to provide this facility and this basic location. What we have here today is a more fulsome report, which, as far as I'm concerned, strengthens and justifies the rationale behind that proposal, and I have no compunction whatsoever in moving, in fact, that the application be granted on the basis of the terms set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Geddes. Councillor Dryburgh, then Councillor McCauley.
Thanks very much, Chair, and I'm happy to second what Alistair says. I agree with everything that he said. I've got a much more in-depth look at the traffic management plan, which were some of the questions at the previous application. I again supported the application the first time. This answers a lot of the questions that were there.
Councillor McCauley.
Yeah, somebody supported it the last time. I've no compunction supporting it this time. And I think it's handy that we've actually got somebody here to answer to the traffic management plan, because all the questions last time were based around the traffic. And I think we've now got a plan there that is more than adequate to cater for what is required. And I think if we don't get a move on with this, we're going to get mentioned by the council archaeologist as a site of some interest, because we've spent a long time on this particular issue.
Councillor Gilroy.
Well, in the efforts of being consistent, I would have to say that this report has done absolutely nothing to convince me that the decision we made at the last committee regarding this application was not, in fact, the correct one. I don't see there's any additional spaces being provided, as they're already there, and added to that, it says in the report that the distance to the overspill raises concerns. The likelihood of park and ride schemes being used is low. That's at 4.919 and 4.21. At 4.23, whilst it's recognised that there are some concerns regarding parking provisions as a consequence, so there's concerns about parking as a consequence of reduced parking spaces and increased demand. The car parks that were shown to us are busy. I was there the other day. There's quite a lot of parking going on around there. It's a rat run. It is not suitable for what we're trying to put there. This is a pig in a poke. We're setting it up to fail. The ice bowl's being hit. The swimming pool's not going to work all the time. And we're just going down a tunnel that is saying failure, failure, failure. And I would say that we're doing it over 2 winters, which means that it's dark at 3:30, 4 o'clock. It's wet, it's cold, and you think people are going to walk down that alleyway? I don't think so. People don't like to walk any further than they have to. So, and the people you're expecting to enforce the restrictions have no way of doing that. So it's a complete failure. It's a disaster. And I would reiterate that the reasons I gave the last time was that the mitigation measures proposed in the submitted traffic management plan could not be managed or enforced, and the proposal is therefore contrary to Nithsdale Local Plan General Policy 2, as it would adversely affect road safety.
Okay, Councillor Hislop.
Well, Chair, for all being consistent, I voted to oppose this the last time. I'll second Councillor Gilroy. I think the only thing that's changed actually in the report is the number of objectors which has went up, and I would actually say if you read through 3.1, that could be a council officer that was writing that, because I think they have actually made some really good points there. And when you look at the third bullet point, where the current facility is already acknowledged by the police to be at capacity, to put something else on the site puts it over capacity in my view, and therefore we should refuse it on the grounds Councillor Gilroy has said.
Any other members? In that case, if the amendment is competent, we will have a motion and amendment. If you just rehearse what they are, Gillian will then go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have a motion by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Dryburgh, to grant the application subject to the conditions detailed in the report, and the amendment by Councillor Gilroy, seconded by Councillor Hislop, to refuse the application on the basis that the mitigation measures proposed in the submitted traffic management plan cannot be managed or enforced, and the proposal is therefore contrary to Nithsdale Local General Policy 2, as it would adversely affect road safety. If I could take your vote, Chair.
Motion.
Councillor Blake.
Motion.
Councillor Crothers.
Motion.
Councillor Dryborough.
Motion.
Councillor Geddes.
Motion.
Councillor Gilroy. Councillor Hislop. Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor McCotry.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Motion.
Councillor McCutcheon.
Motion.
Councillor McKee.
Motion.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Motion.
Councillor Thompson.
Amendment.
Councillor Witts.
Motion.
Therefore,
Gillian, can you confirm the decision, please?
yes, the decision on 4 votes, 11 votes to the motion and 4 votes to the amendment. Therefore, the application has been granted subject to conditions detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. We go into item number 5. Installation of 10 floodlights, maximum 6 metres in height, around tennis court at Yeomanrigg, Lochmaben. The application types full planning permission. The recommendation approved subject to conditions, and the case officer is Vary Dove. Vary, would you take us through your presentation, please?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, the application site is the garden of a house at Yeomanrigg, just to the west of Lochmaben. As you can see, it's a fairly rural area with some other farms and houses surrounding, but it is fairly isolated otherwise. So that's the application site there, which is a tennis court within the grounds of the house, within the garden. So it is a domestic court. And the application is to site 10 floodlighting columns up to a height of 6 metres. So this view that shows the house to the back of the court. And you can see the trees as well, which screen the site quite well. This is looking to the front of the house, roughly from the public road. So the court is actually to the back of these trees, so you can't see it very well. The court again, and that shows where there is actually already some flood lighting at the moment, which is about 2 metres in height. And another view, you can see the farm to the top of the hill there, and that's really the only other house that could see the site. And another view. And this is a plan of where the lights would be sited. And that's quite a big view of the light itself. Which hopefully it's not the actual size. But it is cowled, so it would be directed onto the court itself without any spillage out with it. So because of its isolated location, and being kept a bit of a dip in the landscape, I don't consider that there will be any impact on other properties or in the visual impact elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Vary. Questions for officers? Councillor McKee.
He mentioned one house that's the court's visible to. Vary, are they quite? I take it they've been consulted and they've no objections to this being done.
Vary.
They wouldn't have actually been directly notified because they're probably too far away for that. It's only the properties that are within 20 metres that are, but it would have been advertised in the local press. And I'm also aware that the applicant knows, well, according to the applicant anyway, he does know who lives there, and he told me that they're aware of it. So I haven't had any objection from them anyway.
Okay, that's fine, Barry, thanks.
I'm sure we'll not accept anecdotal evidence, even if it is Councillor Diggle. It's either written evidence or it's no. Councillor Geddes and then Councillor Witt.
On that basis, sir, did we not think of asking for a zone of theoretical visibility?
I can't see that, Ian. Councillor Witt.
Thanks, Chair. We went through that rather quickly. Could I have another quick look at the sighting of the floodlights? Yeah. 10, right, thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions for officers, thank you, Vary. Members are now in session. Councillor McCaughty, Councillor Dryborough, Councillor Carruthers.
I'm happy to move acceptance. I think it just shows how hard-working Councillor Diggle is. He's got a floodlights because that's the only time he can get a game of tennis in the middle of the night, Peter Sewell.
Councillor Dryborough.
Happy to second.
Thank you. In that case, will you confirm the committee's decision, please, Gillian?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the decision is to approve the application subject to the conditions detailed in the report. Okay.
Thank you. Item 6, appeal decision for information and noting only at Boundary Cottage, New Abbey, Dumfries. Noted. Item 7, appeal decision for information noting only at Port Logan in Port Logan. Thank you. And appeal decision for information and noting only formation of vehicular access at 32-34 Scott Street, Annan. Sadly noted, okay. I have no other business. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attendance today.